Public Q&A presents AskReddit question. Which one of history's good guys was actually a horrible person? Alexander Graham Bell pushed for the eugenics of deaf and hard of hearing people, and was a major obstacle to fund schools for the deaf, which thankfully did persist despite this asshat. Also, Helen Keller was a super eugenicist. Not joking either. If only she could see the error of her ways, she would have heard the voices of suffering from such views. So I learned recently that Coco Chanel of Chanel No. 5 was very anti-Semitic and eventually became a Nazi spy. Edit. Spelling. On the flip side of finer sense, Christian Dior created a perfume after his sister, who was a member of the French Resistance. While he almost certainly wasn't the first to say it, Lord Acton once observed that great men are almost always bad men. Pluck any great man from history, those rare figures about whom the story of the human race seems to turn, and you find a monster who changed the world, probably without even intending to do so. It's my estimation that every man ever got a statue made of him was one kind of a son of a bitch or another. Malcolm Reynolds. Yep. I hate reading about my heroes, because really quickly, they lose their hero status. Read about Fred Rogers. You won't have that problem. Mr. Rogers is the only person where you can dig deep as you can to search for bad things only to find more good things instead. Not necessarily a good guy, but got lots of positive attention from the release of The Greatest Showman. Apparently P.T. Barnum was a terrible person in real life. The Greatest Showman is the film P.T. Barnum would release about himself. I remember someone on subreddit Fixing Movies said the perfect way to end the film would have been to have P.T. Barnum look directly at the camera, say, "And that's how it really happened," wink, and then cut to credits. If I had any money whatsoever, I would fund it toward making that ending and re-releasing all of the streams and DVDs with it. Imagine looking like this and casting Hugh Jackman to play you. Ironically enough, I actually see it. Yeah, if PT was Hollywood up and in better shape, that's not far off. I think I heard that that was what the makers were going for. He got his start at age 25, when he purchased the right to rent an aged black woman by the name of Joyce Haight. Joyce Haight was also paralyzed except for one arm, and he worked her to death, and did her autopsy in front of people in the street, and then said it wasn't her. Allegedly extracted her teeth, so she'd appear older too. Amazing entrepreneur. Yes. Hilarious scam artist. Also yes. Evil motherfucker. Abso-fucking-lutely. Edit. So from some of the replies, he may not have been very evil, but he certainly wasn't the best. Still think he's an absolute mad lad for some of the stuff he put on exhibition. Considering he's usually attributed the phrase, "there's a sucker born every minute." I can kind of see that. Edit. Since I have had like 6 people tell me he didn't actually say that, I'll just put my response to that in the main post. I know, that's why I said he was attributed it, and not that he actually was fully on record saying it. My favorite story about him is the egress. He put up a sign in one of his showrooms that said, "Come see the amazing egress." $1. A lot of people bought tickets only for the door to lead back outside. Egress is a fancy way to say exit. He also sewed a mummified monkey top half to the back half of a fish, and called it a mermaid. Edit. He didn't actually sell tickets to the egress, he put signs for it at the end of his exhibit to get people to stop lingering and crowding it. Still a pretty funny joke. You know, you would have bought a ticket and been like, "Wait. Fuck." At the end. The reference to this in Discworld also mentions that there's a bouncer with a dictionary stationed near said egress, in case someone felt like complaining. That's commonly attributed to him, but I believe there's no real evidence he said that. But it should be noted that he once purchased an elderly black woman, and claimed she was a 160 years old and George Washington's wet nurse. You didn't see that in the movie. Edit. It should also be noted that The Greatest Showman not only exalted a man who actively exploited and tricked people, but it vilified genuinely good people. Such as James Gordon Bennett Sr., who was known as a journalist exposing hucksters like Barnum, and Jenny Lind, who used her earnings from her American tour to fund free schools in her home country. She did not get jealous when he rebuffed her. She found his relentless marketing disconcerting. That movie is as greasy as P.T. Barnum. He also profited off of the public autopsy of this woman. Her name was Joyce Heath, to prove that she was 160 years old to a crowd of 1,500 onlookers at 50 cents pop. He was a disgusting man that furthered the human zoo movement. I actually enjoyed the movie quite a bit, but in my mind, it's not even about P.T. Barnum. It's a completely fictional account of his life written by someone whose only research into the real person was skimming the first couple of paragraphs of his Wikipedia page. In response to Sound of Music, the real Maria Von Trapp supposedly said, "It's a lovely story. It's not my story, but it's a lovely story." That's how I feel about Greatest Showman and P.T. Barnum's story. But boy could he sing. I realized during the movie that the real guy must have been a terrible asshole. My girlfriend and her family wouldn't buy it. I'll never forget how my then father-in-law told us that the character of Barnum should be an example for us in life. Well, the movie character may be LOL. Well, let's be honest. From the begin on, it was clear that the movie character just wants to make money of his friends, while making them believe that the audience actually liked them. Using people as a means to a moral questionable end makes you a dick. Period. The Greatest Showman was weird. The actual story of P.T. Barnum is interesting. I don't see why they felt the need to change it. Jebediah Springfield, or his real less commonly known name, Hans Sprungfeld, the murderous pirate. He had a silver tongue. You're banned from this thread. You and your children, and your children's children. For 3 months. Prob a better man than his cousin Shelbyville, Manhattan, to be fair. He was a perfectly cromulent person who embiggened the smallest men. Alfred Hitchcock was an asshole or sexual predator. Tippi Hedren wrote about it in her memoir. She did say he was a brilliant film marker, so you can be both. Luckily, no other famous directors were sexual predators. I have been roaming around this thread looking for this reference. Would he been better if you had stayed put? No need to whine about it, geez. It's just a matter of clause and effect. BILLCOSBY. You have great comedic timing, sir. I can hardly believe you said that. Yo, Hitchcock is so fucked up. He was famous for pulling pranks like chaining a dude up over a long night, and giving him a bottle of whiskey laced with serious laxatives, so he shat himself, painfully, in chains, for 12 hours or so. He made the actress from Psycho, Janet Leigh, stand in the shower for almost a week. She only takes baths now. The degree to which he abused Tippi Hedren during that scene from The Birds is... wow. He literally threw birds at her for 5 days, 8 hours a day, so that they were pissed off and actually attacked her, even after her doctor told him she couldn't take any more. She still has scars. Not to mention the sexual assaults and the threats to ruin her career if she didn't comply. He sent her daughter, Melanie Griffith, a really lifelike doll of her mother, dead in a coffin. She was 8. Dude was fucked. Behind the Bastards does a great couple episodes about him. Those are just the ones I remember off the top of my head from 2+ hours of it. He did send her daughter what now? No wonder his most famous work was named Psycho, for fuck's sake. Rudyard Kipling, author of The Jungle Book. Paraphrasing, the only way to keep the yellow man out is to bring the white man in. Also got his son killed by using his influence to get him into the army despite his son's piss poor eyesight. Bit of a dick move if you ask me. Henry Ford was so anti-Semitic that Hitler considered him a hero. Brave New World makes a whole lot more sense now. How? I haven't read the book. Basically, bunch of genetically identical people idolize assembly lines and worship Henry Ford as their god. Yes, it's as weird as it sounds. At the time they seemed so out there, but I am very glad Brave New World, The Giver, 1984, and Catch-22 were all part of my primary or secondary school curriculum. Definitely complex concepts that didn't sink in initially, but very important themes to teach children. Most of those authors have lived incredible lives too. Reading about their experiences helped me understand the context better, weirdly enough. Orwell's Homage to Catalonia is a very insightful account of his time in the Spanish Civil War. I was reading your post and thought it would end with that Hitler thought he should chill. Tinkerbell. Everybody thinks she was so cute and such a good friend to Peter, but she was a jealous psychopath and tried to murder Wendy several times. I mean, in the book she only did it once. Because that makes attempted murder better. Fae don't hold themselves to human moral standards. You really have to wonder what happened to Tinkerbell between the new CG movies and Peter Pan. What do you mean? Well, you've seen the newer Tinkerbell movies. She has a little bit of a temper, but otherwise she's a pretty sweet-hearted fairy, and she lives with all of the other fairies. Then, in Peter Pan, she's the only fairy you see, and she's more interested in being with Peter. Not only that, but she tries on more than one occasion to murder Wendy, and when called out on it, she shows no remorse. Ice cold. Clearly something horrific went down in Pixie Hollow, and Tink is either the cause, or just the sole survivor. Good lord. So Peter Pan is actually a grim post-apocalyptic tale, yes. But in the books Peter Pan is also basically a psychopath. There are multiple references to the Lost Boys being worried he'd kill them. One of the main points of the book is that children don't know right from wrong unless they have parents to teach them. He kills them if they start growing up. Ned Kelly is neat, because he seems to have recognized his anti-hero status. His actions were never morally right, but it's hard to say we haven't ever wanted to do the same. I feel like a lot of Ned Kelly's actions were justified if you take his accounts as opposed to the policemen he dealt with. The truth is likely somewhere in between. There's no excuse for his early theft, but those wouldn't make him a horrible person by today's standards. He was a criminal turned outlaw turned national hero, or revolutionary. Sure, he stole and murdered, but he was a product of his upbringing and the state of Australia at the time. People and history are weird. Take Jesse James. He was revered while he was alive. People loved him then and took pictures with his corpse when he died. People still find him fascinating, and yet he wasn't a good guy by any stretch of the imagination. Dillinger too. If I recall correctly, Dillinger was particularly popular because lots of people lost everything they had to the banks during the Great Depression. Many lost their farm, felt helpless and humiliated. They saw Dillinger as someone who was stealing the money back and punishing the banks. This was apparently part of Ned Kelly's appeal too. When the law turns oppressive, the outlaw becomes the hero. This thread reads like the Oatmeal's greatest hits. Lighting McQueen. The scene when he yells at Mater for embarrassing him in front of everyone by leaking oil. Total douche. Mater. Haven't heard that name in years. Astronomer here. This is a hard one to admit, because I definitely loved his book and idolized his antics a bit when I was a young physics major, but Richard Feynman. A lot of people read "Surely you're joking, Mr. Feynman," and share my reaction, and his physics lectures are amazing, but the older I get and the more people I meet who knew him, holy shit. The guy was beyond just. Times were different levels of misogyny against women. He committed domestic violence against his wife, kept lying to undergrads when he was in Cornell that he wasn't a professor so he could sleep with him, and rumor has it, had to leave Cornell for Caltech because he slept with other faculty members' wives. And I have definitely heard a ton about him trying to pick up other scientists at physics conferences to know he was considered a creep. To be clear, I think someone can do good science and be an awful person, but that's not what Op was asking. Also, anyone who has been around a physics department knows that casual sexist jokes and the like are still not that uncommon today, and the fact that physics keeps idolizing Feynman probably doesn't help in changing the culture. Feynman was renowned for sitting in strip clubs and drawing nudes of the dancers in his off time. I have been reading an autobiography of Dyson Freeman, who spent time with RF, traveled and rode trips. Richard was a womanizer after his wife died. He had a reputation as a doting husband during his marriage and during his wife's illness. After her death, though, genius intellect and carouser. Feynman was renowned for sitting in strip clubs and drawing nudes of the dancers in his off time. That part doesn't sound like the worst guy at the strip club. Exactly what I was going to comment. The most important and disturbing part for me is that this behavior only started after his wife's death. Man really loved her, and you can really tell from the letters and him sticking around while she was dying. I really believe her death changed him. There is this beautiful heartbreaking letter he writes to her after her death. "I love my wife. My wife is dead." Since most have been covered, I'll do a guy who was a true fucking villain who turned into kind of a decent guy. It doesn't nearly wipe the slate clean, but it's an interesting historical transformation. Nathan Bedford Forrest. Slave trader. Confederate general. Likely war criminal. First Grand Wizard of the Klan. In later years, Forrest expressed regret at his life's work. He began publicly advocating for former slaves to receive better treatment, including their ability to enter into higher education. He attempted to act upon his shame by petitioning President Grant to allow him to put down the KKK by force. Edit. My caveat wasn't strong enough, and that might be my own clumsy wording. Forrest was undoubtedly a monster in some ways, and his legacy as one shouldn't be altered, despite his regrets. At least he made the attempt to redeem himself. If we cannot change as a person after our mistakes, however diabolical, then what is the point? Might as well just go murderin'. Margaret Mead said that the first sign of civilization is the splint. Animals break legs and die, left to fend for themselves. Humans break legs and are cared for by other humans until they get better. Legs can be broken for lots of different reasons, but the aftercare, the investment into others that may or may not ever be recouped, that is a primordial sign of human civilization. Forgiveness is a splint for the human soul. It does not always pay off, and it can't undo what was done, but without it our souls can never develop a spiritual civilization. It wasn't Jane Goodall that said this, but anthropologist Margaret Mead. I can't find a primary source for this, but this Stack Exchange link should provide a bit more clarity. Web address. On a similar note, George Wallace, Alabama governor, Mr. Segregation Today, Segregation Tomorrow, Segregation Forever, later renounced his racism, appointed record numbers of African American to state positions, and personally asked black leaders for forgiveness. When he ran for a final term as governor in 1982, he won with 90% of the black vote. In this thread, a lot of people who were never considered good guys. Unpopular opinion. Dog lover and painter Adolf Hitler did some pretty questionable stuff in the 30s. Really changed his ways in the 40s though. Even killed a genocidal dictator. Even killed a genocidal dictator. Yeah. But he also killed the guy that killed Hitler. Yeah, kind of questionable. There's another side to it. I mean, he did kill that asshole who killed the guy who killed Hitler. There's a statue of Oliver Cromwell in London. Loads of movies about him, and how he was a brave revolutionary. Nah, fuck that. He was an evil sociopath who committed genocide on Irish Catholics and turned the UK into a Puritan dictatorship. Cunt banned Christmas and dancing. Miserable prick. Welcome to the Christmas party. No Christmas-related thing. Oh, okay. And no dancing. Edit. A guy below says he would have done it better, so I am stealing his comment. Welcome to the Christmas party. No dancing. No party. Also, no Christmas. As someone who lives in England, I had no idea people actually see him favorably. Coming from an English or Irish background, I grew up hearing how much of a bastard he was, especially with regards to his treatment of the Irish. I am amazed statues stand. I thought he has been hated by the general populace pretty consistently since he took power. After the monarchy restoration, the people hated him so much that they dug his corpse back up to posthumously execute him. Who decided it was a good idea to erect statues of him? I have always thought that his statues are there as a warning to our monarchs to make sure they don't get any funny ideas about the divine right of kings again. Bob Marley. And there's a very good story to back this up that also explains how he grew to be one reggae singer of Jamaica. He had a posse of friends that would intimidate radio networks of Jamaica into playing his music, as well as destroying the alpha discs of other newer artists. WTF, they are called, but the copy the radio networks were given in order to play on the air. He might have been trying to promote feel-good music and peace, and all that, but he was a thug when it came to getting that music out. Web address. And at the same time gave a dude songwriter credit, so that he'd get royalties from the music, and be able to keep his soup kitchen open. People are so weird. Bully one guy, help another, rape his wife, help a guy keep his soup kitchen open. Fuck. Goes to show how complicated people are. Idolize ideals, not people. This is how cults of personality get so gnarly. People refuse to acknowledge traits or actions inconsistent with their image of the person. Eventually they just cling on to a fictional image, so they don't have to reevaluate their beliefs. This also reminds me a bit of never meet your heroes. Because once you meet them, you realize that they are human and flawed just like yourself. Had this happened to me once, it was not cool. Was also alleged to be monstrously terrible to his wife, according to her. That's so sad to read. She insists he was a good husband despite cheating on her repeatedly, fathering children that weren't hers, and raping her. It's like Stockholm Syndrome, or something else might more accurately describe it. I am no psychologist. Fathering children that weren't hers. That's an understatement. I believe he has somewhere around 11 children from 7 different women. She raised 7 children that weren't hers, and for that were. Well, his family are kind of dicks also. Charlie Chaplin. He got married to a 15-year-old girl because he got her pregnant when she was 14. He was openly pedophile. And, from what I have read, quite an asshole. Apparently, he and Marlon Brando worked together later on, and Charlie was such an uptight asshole that Marlon Brando, of all people, had to tell him to chill the hell out. Brando, for what it's worth, is infamous for demanding ridiculous concessions from directors for his performances, refusing to learn his lines, and a number of other things. Have for a moment thought Charlie Chaplin was getting accused of refusing to learn his lines. Like famously teaming up with Bertolucci to assault Maria Schneider in Last Tango in Paris. Shorter list would be which of history's good guys were truly good guys, and not later found out to be complete $a holes. Edit. Thank you for the award, stranger. I don't really know what else to say. So thank you. Curly from the Three Stooges. Typically having several dogs at any given time, Curly was known to come home often with strays he found along his travels. He would foster the strays until he was able to find new homes. And when the Stooges were on tour, Curly made it a point to rehome at least one stray in each town they visited. It is estimated that Curly saved and rehomed more than 5,000 dogs in his lifetime, making him a man before his time, with his humane concern for man's best friend. This makes me so happy, I love it so much. Thank you. I am happy it didn't turn evil. Imagine getting a dog from the Three Stooges. That would be super cool. Which of history's bad guys were actually good guys? Would be an interesting one. Mr. Rogers. The dude used to fart loudly to make his wife laugh. I mean, not only is that love, but it's one of the purest forms of humor. Babies laugh at farts. The oldest joke we know of from Sumeria, c. 1900 BCE, is a fart joke. Something which has never occurred since time immemorial. A young woman did not fart in her husband's lap. Apparently the Sumerians had some pretty dry fart jokes. Better than the alternative, I guess. Probably a loose translation. My Sumerian is rusty, but I think it says, a lover who won't fart in your lap is always just an arm's length away. There's nothing to say these people were bad or assholes, but even if they were, Jonas Salk invented polio vaccine, didn't patent it, and Norman Borlaug created agriculture techniques that fed billions, will always be on my good guy list. Bob Ross. The battered, bruised, and beaten paintbrushes he left in his wake may disagree with you. Paintbrushes devils. Bob Ross, TV host, painter, teacher, paintbrush exorcist. Steve Jobs was a bit of an ass. A bit? You should read Small Fry. Steve Jobs was a tremendous asshole. He should also read the Walter Isaacson biography. He was a massive, tremendous asshole. Literally abandoned his daughter because he didn't want to be a dad. Screaming at people over the shade of yellow on the Google screen on iPhone. Thought he could cure his cancer with diet. He was given a night shift at Atari because he smelled so bad, because he thought by eating clean he wouldn't produce any stink. He was abandoned by his own father, which makes bailing on his kid that much worse. Imo. Didn't he die because he refused treatment to cancer? Edit. Yes, apparently he refused loads of treatment for many years until it got worse. He had pancreatic cancer and refused to listen to his doctors for treatment. He thought he was so much smarter, and he somehow came to the conclusion that an all-fruit diet would cure him. This was possibly the worst diet you can put your pancreas through, and it led to his death. Fun fact, when Ashton Kutcher was getting ready for his role as Jobs in that movie, he ate an all-fruit diet, but had to stop when he was admitted to the hospital because his pancreas started to shut down. Fucking Christ. A girl I know shared a video from a doctor on a morning talk show stating that the sun doesn't cause cancer, your diet does. Based on one study done on cows. I looked up the doctor, I can't remember her name off the top of my head, and she also thinks the Holocaust is fake, lol. He was apparently a real hippie in many ways. Insisted on strange diets. Didn't shower. Washed his feet in the toilet bowl. Web address. Ashton Kutcher talked about this a little when he was on Hot Wings. Said that he tried to live like Jobs and be on a carrot juice diet. This ended up turning his skin orange and giving him kidney or pancreas problems, I forget which. Steve Jobs died of pancreatic cancer. Bit was an understatement. The guy was a massive credit hog, abused his employees, and normalized a lot of shit business practices that are now used by several other companies. As was said about Rockefeller, he never broke a law in his life. But he is the reason they wrote a lot of them. This is a little more niche, but Bill Wilson, the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. The guy did great things, and created a program of recovery that has saved millions of lives since its inception 85 years ago. He was also an arrogant asshole that cheated on his wife even in sobriety. Edit. This isn't here to scare away anyone that's trying to get sober. I have been sober thanks to AA for 1 or 2 years. So don't let this keep you away if you're struggling with your drinking. Nothing is black and white, it seems. Zebras would like a word. They aren't either. You ever cut one open? Nothing is black and white, it seems. Nothing would like a word. There are quite a fair amount of fucking assholes in AA who use the 12 steps and being sober as a cover for their arrogant self-centered true self. I believe people can change, though I have definitely seen a lot of people not just quit using substances, but also become a decent human being as well. Make no mistake, just because you put the bottle down doesn't mean you're a saint, lol. Ick man, when I read about Martin Luther last year, I thought he was kind of cool as he created the Protestant branch of Christianity, but I recently read about what he thought of Jews, and yikes. For those of you who don't know, he got pissed when the Jews didn't want to convert to his religion and started being anti-Semitic as fuck. He wrote a whole book on Jews and their lies and said that he urged others to burn down synagogues to prove their loyalty to Christianity. He also wanted the Jewish prayer books to be taken away from them. Edit. Because of misunderstandings, I do not mean Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther was a monk during the 16th century who initially started the Reformation for Christianity, and was the founder of Protestantism. Most of southern Germany remained Catholic because of a pamphlet he published entitled Against the Murderous, Thieving Hordes of Peasants after a peasant revolt trying to reduce the taxes on their fields. I misread and thought it said Martin Luther King Jr., and I was shocked, LMAO. So glad you said this. I thought the same thing. Alexander Graham Bell. This man did not invent the telephone. Several people were working on similar technology at the same time. Antonio Meucci invented it first, but there was a court case over who got the patent rights. Meucci died before the case was settled, and Graham Bell won the glory he didn't deserve. Tony Soprano knew this and went apeshit over it at the dinner table. Antonio Meucci invented the telephone, and he got robbed. You know, Quasimodo predicted all this. Tony bragging about the accomplishments of great working-class Italians, while he lives out their worst stereotype, was hilarious. Bell was also a eugenicist who sought to end sign language in schools, and wanted to ban deaf people from marrying each other. He was a staunch oralist, and the repercussions of his actions are still being felt in society today through such oddist institutions like the Bell Institute. We learned quite a lot about old Alexander Graham Bell in ASL class. You never, unfortunately, learn how much of a cunt he was in elementary school. Yeah, there's a Montessori school near me named after him that has special classes for deaf children. WTF were they thinking with that name selection? Maybe the name is a subtle jab at his views. In some aspects to the 60s and 70s when the Beatles were icons, I am talking about John Lennon. People who use his image and face for peace sometimes forget important details. He abused women. He was a cheater. He abused his children, made one go completely deaf in one ear. Total hypocrite on the no possessions when he lived one of the most lavish lifestyles of his time. Compulsive liar. Almost killed a few people. Look up Bob Wooler. He was almost punched to death by John. There were others, but their stories have either been disputed or unclaimed. So whenever I see a bunch of people sing Imagine, I just shake my head in shame, cause so many people don't even know how bad he was but act like he was a saint. As a massive Beatles fanatic, when I come across people who say that John is this symbol of peace, I always remind them of this. You cannot be a true fan of something or so many, and not criticize it, and all of the other Beatles would come before John in this regard. This is why I prefer Paul McCartney. John may have written great songs, but he was a prick. George is the real symbol of peace. Imo. America's Dad, Bill Cosby. We've been watching 30 Rock in our house lately, and in a recent episode that predated the Cosby revelations by a few years, Tracy Morgan makes a joke about Cosby being a terrible person for assaulting his aunt. That was pretty crazy to hear in context today. 30 Rock has a whole lot of Cosby references, and they're almost all negative. As the other guy said, Hannibal Buress knew. My recollection is that most people in Hollywood knew to some extent, but like most powerful men in Hollywood, the allegations against him didn't get taken seriously. Hannibal Buress didn't know what kind of reaction he was going to get. He'd done the bit before, and wasn't trying to start a national scandal about it. He was just doing a joke for his comedy routine, and this time his Cosby bit went viral. Just pointing out that one, many more people knew about Cosby the entire time, and two, Buress wasn't trying to be an activist when he sparked the fire, just being a comedian. Didn't either Seth MacFarlane or Ricky Gervais make jokes about Harvey Weinstein being at least a very well-known creep years before Me Too actually being a thing? When Seth MacFarlane was the host of the Oscars, he was congratulating an actress for winning, and he said, "You no longer have to pretend to be attracted to Harvey Weinstein." Also, Jenna Maroney in 30 Rock said, paraphrasing, "Oh, I am not afraid to say no to things. I turned down sex with Harvey Weinstein 3 out of 5 times." Both of these predated the revelations about Weinstein. Probably. Remember, Courtney Love said don't go to Harvey's office on a red carpet, which led to her being smeared across the media. It was also common knowledge that Kevin Spacey preyed on young men. Lots of these things are swept under the carpet because these people can truly fuck over many other powerful people. When I was a kid, I loved Jim'll Fix It and wanted to go on the show. My parents actively discouraged it, and I am pretty sure any letters I sent went straight into the bin. They were in the police, and he was a massive pedophile who abused kids in hospital. She even prefaced that she'd get libeled if she said that. When even Courtney Love is getting scared about something like that, that says a lot. Courtney Love may not be the world's sweetest person or smartest person or a moral paragon, but if you ever read her lengthy breakdown of how the music industry financially screws artists, you'd know that she is bright and opinionated and quite gutsy. I have a lot of respect for her. Web address. There were very low-key rumors and sly statements made for many years, especially by other comedians. Very few had much good to say about him. There was also a lot of controversy surrounding many of the things he said on stage in later years that started to change the public's perception of him. Just took a long time to come to light. Same about Kevin Spacey. I remember being on movie forums back during his run with The Usual Suspects to American Beauty. It wasn't uncommon for someone to hint that he was homosexual and had done a few things. Fun fact, Hannibal Buress was a writer on 30 Rock, and would go on to blow up this whole Cosby thing years later by making a joke about it in his stand-up. Yep. One of his victims was in the crowd and only then learned it was kind of a well-kept secret. Gave her the courage to come forward. I didn't know that's how the backlash started. Hannibal Buress equals good guy. Why are you booing me? I am right. If that's true, that's insane to think how he did it to so many people that one happened to be at the Hannibal Buress show that night. Who was the mom? Sleeping Beauty. Harold Holt. He forgot my birthday. I forgot his last location. Hey, 10 minutes ago I read a sentence about doing like Harold Holt, well, disappear while swimming, to start a new life. A suspense novel by James DeLargy, 55. Anyway, if you find him again, I hope he'll remember your birthday. That's the least the man can do. Depends on what you mean. Judging by today's standards, I would say most historical good guys were horrible people. Judging by the standards of their era, things become more complicated. Yeah, even abolitionists back in the day may have been against slavery, but that didn't mean they thought blacks should be treated equally. Shout out to John Brown. John Brown was one hardcore motherfucker, LMAO. Where's his movie? I love this mural of John Brown in the Kansas state capitol. In one hand he's holding a Bible, and in the other a John Brown Bible, aka a gun. And those abolitionists who did think that people of color should be equal to white folks were effectively shut up by their peers. It was thought that if they asked for equality, the slaves would never be free. It's an interesting thing to think about, but I get upset when people try to pass it off as if there weren't people and groups fighting for equality in that era. There definitely were, but the other abolitionists oppressed their voices as to deal with the larger problem, rather than the underlying problem. I still don't know what was right in that situation, and maybe that's okay, but the situation is a little more complicated than just abolitionists thought that blacks shouldn't be equal. It was thought that if they asked for equality, the slaves would never be free. They were correct. Fun fact: Rosa Parks was not the first person to refuse to give up her seat. That honor goes to Claudette Colvin, but the NAACP did not endorse her activism because she was of darker color than Rosa Parks, a teenager, and a single mother. The activists knew that white society would find it harder to acknowledge her, and that it would hinder their efforts for equality. Meanwhile, Rosa Parks was an older, more well-spoken and respected member of the community, which made her easier for white people to accept. Edit. Technically, she's not the first, but she is the first one who was involved in the civil rights movement. I hear people parrot the darker skin thing about Claudette all the time, but I have never seen a good source that corroborates that. Everything I have seen focused on the fact that she was 15, and pregnant with the child of a man who was married to someone else in 1955. That was more than enough to disqualify her at the time. I'd love to see even a single reliable source for the too black claim. Yeah, my understanding is that a larger concern was that she was really young to have that much pressure on her, while Rosa Parks was an extremely experienced activist, which also gets left out of the story. The version I heard in school made her sound like an old lady who impulsively decided to take an arbitrary stand, but it was a thought-out, calculated plan from an experienced activist, and she deserves credit for that. Rosa literally worked for the NAACP to boot. Sir John A. Macdonald, first Prime Minister of Canada, did a lot for the country in its infancy but treated Indigenous people like garbage. Notorious drunkard too. Once, when debating his opponent, he vomited on stage and quipped, "I get sick, not because of drink but because I am forced to listen to the ranting of my honorable opponent." Wow! You are still with us. Thanks for being such a nice person. As long as you are here, why not like this video and subscribe to our channel? Also, you can press the bell icon so you won't miss any future uploads.